and had some hopefully some basic skill mastery in the activity, which gives you an intrinsic reward. There's a whole cognitive mastery area of the brain that lights up in every primate that, whenever you master a new skill or begin to master a new skill, you get that intrinsic reward, you're motivated to do more of it. If we can get anyone in any level of learning to enjoy the learning for its own sake, rather than thinking, I'll get grades, even if I'll get a job at the end of it, is an extrinsic reward, so it's not as strong a motivator or as useful a motivator as enjoying the process. The other thing with this is it gives us this idea in a school kind of environment, always give them the practical skill first, let them try it out and then teach them what it is that they've just been doing, because all this information is pointless without context. If you don't have a chessboard, that book is useless. If you don't have a sailboat, the other book, again, if you don't have any paints, you could read that book a dozen times a day for a year and still not be a great painter. How does it relate to the school thing? A lot of good research on education has said, again, try the practical task out first. I was going to mention programming. Programming is actually another classic example of a flow activity. I don't know how many of you guys actually do, 8-10 hours a day occasionally of just going and getting lost in that world and coming out of it with some usable code at the end of it. That's very much the same kind of thing. You're not focused on the outside world at all. Your challenge and the skills are perfectly matched. You come up with something, hopefully, that is useful and that makes your skills better by the end of it as well. So, gamification of education. Wouldn't it be great, take the boring and make it exciting, enjoyable, and a flow activity. Lovely, as a concept. And games are identified recently as a very easy way to get into a flow state. You don't have to become highly skilled. Almost every other game is designed so that you can just start playing it. You read the manual later, generally, again, much like any of the other flow activities. You don't have to be an expert, you'll rapidly get into that flow state. And that's what is so appealing to educators. But, what are the pitfalls? Well, arguably, a lot of schools are already rather like Skinner boxes. Adding the game side might improve that, or it might not. I'm not convinced that the way the game industry works, again, arguably saying it's bad. I'm saying it's bad art. I'm a game designer, but I'm still going to be critical of what I do to some extent. A lot of very popular games at the top of the market are predicated more on the kind of Hollywood movie model, where it's going to cost a lot to produce it. It doesn't really matter if it loses money, because we'll have another one out next week, that might gain money. And so they're just throwing all these kind of concepts out, and all they really need to do is to play for long enough that they get their money. It might be a monthly subscription fee, it might be just the initial purchase price, and then if you throw it away at the end of 6 months, that's fine. That's not what we want to have people in education doing. We want them to focus on learning skills and keeping on learning them rather than getting bored with them. And the main reason people do get bored with them is the brain is very capable of perceiving when it's being controlled. You can train a rat or a pigeon this way. You can try training a dog this way, and a lot of the time it behaves while you're watching it, and then as soon as you turn it back, it's off doing its own thing. Humans are much more smart than dogs. They really resent being controlled and programmed. You'll see it in army-type environments or institutionalized kind of environments, but for the vast majority of us, as soon as you put us in a box, we're trying to break our way out. And particularly if we're in a box when we've been told this is a game, this is going to be fun, that game goes straight down the second-hand shop and gets sold. As soon as you realise, no, it's just drawing me in, it's wasting my time, it's boring. We don't want to do that with schoolwork, ideally. So can we do that, lovely goal of turning it into something more like sailing? Well, let's try. Why are people bored in school? Back to the flow kind of concept, the task just isn't challenging enough for their skill. They can get bored in the other direction. If a child doesn't really care whether it learns the subject or not, usually, in that flow diagram, they'd be in an anxious state, they're not skilled enough. But if the subject's boring and they're not really interested in learning it, they don't get anxious, they're just bored, they're doing something else, they're getting distracted. We come up with this intrinsic motivation. Again, intrinsic motivation is that desire for learning, in this case, for its own sake, or desire to do anything, work, for its own sake. Extrinsic is you're being offered a reward or promised a punishment for doing it. Now, again, there's been some good recent research on this as related to games. We've got some advocates of gamification arguing that Because the classic flow activities require constant feedback, you need to know all the time, am I getting better, am I exercising my skills? And that's how you get better, is receiving feedback. You know, you feel the sail in the wind, or you see that your opponents get on a positional advantage on the chessboard. You get the constant feedback, and that's how you get better and how you improve your flow skills. So if you give children points or levels in a classroom, like in a computer role-playing game, is that like feedback, or is it more like a reward? And there's not enough research done on this, and that will be a lot of what I will be doing, because there's arguments both ways, really. There's a lot of research on the neurology of virtual rewards done very recently, which indicates that the same areas of the brain light up if you get virtual money in an online game as if you get real money. And again, weirdly, much the same rewards light up if you get social kudos for being involved in an online community. If people are impressed with you, it's all hitting that same kind of reward mechanism, even if the motivations are different. But yeah, intrinsic motivation. How do we make that happen? It should be doable. I've got 4 main approaches to trying to turn education more into the flow activity. Some of them will be directly reliant on games, some of them might not. Focus on the intrinsic motivation. Be aware of those risks associated with extrinsic motivators. It doesn't mean that you must never use extrinsic motivators. Inevitably, you have to have some way to assess children. You can't have them go through and leave school at 16 or 18 and no one's really got any idea as to what their skills are other than them. So there has to be some kind of qualification at the end of it, but there are ways to minimise those risks, which I will get onto. Different subjects require learning in different ways. The more flow-like an activity is, the more it is possible to just give the children the tools to do the job, and not even really need to give them much of an introduction, just straight on into practical skills. For some subjects that's not really possible, and particularly for subjects that aren't really that interesting. I mean, for most people, I love language and grammar. For most people, that's not that interesting to learn, because it's a particularly geeky area that, unless you're obsessive about making sure that your spelling and grammar are perfect, most people aren't, and it's most irrelevant. How do we teach that? Well, we don't teach it necessarily by having people learn from a book of spelling and grammar, because there's no motivation to do that. And then adjusting the challenge. This is something that schools all over the world really struggle with, is that the brighter students get bored because their skill level is higher than the material being introduced. Computer games are amazingly good at this. Every computer game adapts constantly to one's skill level when one plays it, and only introduces the more difficult tasks after one has mastered the advanced, the basic tasks. And there's a large amount of time available. So intrinsic motivation. We've got a couple of schools, mostly I think both of them are in the US at the moment, that have this explicit radical approach of we're going to turn everything into a video game. And I think they're actually pretty good compared to some of the potential pitfalls there. They have things like embedded secret quests. This is a brilliant idea because it fits in with that intrinsic motivation approach. If you're in the library doing a bit of extra study after your maths class, you might find inside a library book a little note with a secret quest in to break a particular code, and it gets you interested in cryptography and getting other books out, and you assemble a team based on people within the class who might be able to do that, and you get extra credits for doing it. And that, it gets people learning. It makes the whole thing feel more exciting inherently. It feels more like a computer game. The other nice thing to take from the computer game approach is this low cost of failure concept. If all that you're doing is playing a game, it doesn't matter if your avatar dies. Generally you can restart the level. It's not a big deal. And so you're constantly encouraged to try new things, to take risks. Most education systems discourage that. It's easier to just keep doing the same thing, keep doing what the teacher told you. Because if you try something new, you might get punished, you might fail the class, and there's no easy way to do that. So the way that they recommend doing that, they do have this classes and levels kind of approach to success, rather than having to pass a test, and if you fail, that's it, you failed the year. You accumulate points during the year, and you level up at the end of it when you have enough points. And if you didn't get enough points during the school year, you can keep going back, you can keep doing it in your own home on your own computer, do a test again and again until you've got it. Rather than the classic leaving a child behind, or, oops, sorry, most of the rest of the class are finished with this, it's time to move on to the next subject. Competence. Now these next three they come from a concept called self-determination theory, which is one of the, I think, most promising concepts in positive psychology recently, in that it's very well tested, there's been a lot of research done on it, and it's very much focused on intrinsic motivation. There are three main drives related to it: competence, autonomy, and relatedness. People love being competent at skills, generally. So if you can, even if the children who don't want to learn stuff because they think it's more cool to, smoke cigarettes and drink cider and not go to school, if you can get them interested in learning by stimulating that innate desire to learn, they'll keep coming back. Autonomy is very important. Again, a lot of traditional schools don't do this. A lot of the better computer games do. You offer goals and then you let the students work out how they want to get there. You'll see this most commonly in computer game terms in a lot of the physics games, where you might have a problem of you've got to get this virtual ball from one side of the virtual map to another, and you've got various virtual components that you can put together into a machine for doing so, and the ballistics and the physics are all more or less like the real world. You experiment and you keep trying and eventually it gets there. You don't necessarily have one solution. So again, I think this simulates the competence aspect as well, but the more autonomous you can make somebody generally, the more they're intrinsically motivated to do the task. I mean, I'm sure you guys all have an awareness of that from your professional lives as well, that if you feel like there's a superior who tells you exactly what you have to do, you don't enjoy work, whereas if you feel like, okay, this is the goal we have at the end of the year now, you sort it out, there's a motivation to work in the evenings and just keep going, and hopefully you get a brilliant solution out of it, particularly if there's permission to fail. So relatedness, this is another nice one in that I don't know how well the education system in Germany works on this one. I know that the US is regarded as one of the worst on the planet for it, in terms of making the children compete with each other rather than cooperate. And I know that a lot of the people are working on this years back was saying, look at Europe, look at UK, this kind of thing, because they're at least starting to encourage people to work cooperatively. So this encourages socialising, it encourages working in the same kind of ways that people tend to work in the real world. It's very rare in the real world that you're the only person with responsibility for a particular task. You recruit a team, you share resources, and you share learning. This shared learning part we'll come back to later, but again, in almost any field, you'll find great teachers will always say that there's more about doing the task, whatever it is, when they started teaching it. I'm sure that's the case of singing teachers, chess teachers, etc., because you have to analyse every process of it. And there's also another aspect in positive psychology that comes up. If you're able to pass on a skill to somebody, and you will see this in children playing computer games all the time, they'll help each other out. And when the one who was new to the game finishes a level or masters a game or whatever, the one who showed them it is elated. There's an amazing boost in the brain that occurs whenever one successfully teaches somebody anything. Okay, so the risks of extrinsic motivators. I've covered this a little bit, so one tends to focus on the reward, not the activity, on the pizza rather than the ingredient, There's the ability to game the system. I was kind of thinking about that with regard to the PhD setup at Glindua recently, in that there's this point system where one has to get 24 points during the year to do professional competence or something along those lines. And it's a box-ticking exercise. If you get the 24 points, then that's that area passed. It doesn't matter what else you've done, as long as you've got 24 points. And as a gamer, I can say, okay, well, I've got 12 points for doing this. The easiest way to get another 12 is I'll do 6 of these 2-point tasks. It doesn't necessarily mean I've become more competent at anything, because if it was based around me becoming more professionally competent, I'd have to do the stuff that wasn't easy for me. But instead, it's points, so I've just got to tick some boxes.